Our top story tonight, a historic and emotional day as President Trump announces the capture of Venezuelan regime leader Nicolas Maduro. The Department of Justice charging him with narco-terrorism conspiracy and saying he'll soon face the full wrath of American justice. Mari Otsu at the White House. With the capture of Nicolas Maduro, Venezuelans around the world are celebrating. What does it mean for Americans? New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani revokes orders from his predecessor, including some aimed at combating anti-Semitism and protecting free speech during his first days on the job. And in the NFL, it all comes down to this weekend as teams battle for the final 2 playoff spots. NTD's Dave Martin joins us to discuss.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Arlene Richards. A historic day with President Trump announcing the capture of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro overnight in a large-scale U.S. military operation. It comes after explosions rocked the capital of Caracas and surrounding states early this morning. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu at the North Lawn of the White House. Mari, it's good to see you this evening. So what's the latest, and did we expect this in the weeks leading up to the president's announcement today?
Arlene, good evening. Yes, as you said, an absolutely historic day in 24 hours. At 10:46 p.m. Eastern time last night, President Trump ordered that mission, which is being called Operation Absolute Resolve. And now just 18 hours later, deposed Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and his wife have arrived in New York. And just like Operation Midnight Hammer, what we saw over the summer with the taking out of Iran's nuclear facilities, this was a very swift military operation and no American lives were lost. And just over his Christmas break in Mar-a-Lago, President Trump hit ISIS in Nigeria on Christmas over their persecution of Christians. And on Christmas Eve, the U.S. conducted its first land strike in Venezuela after months of military buildup in the Caribbean. General Dan Kane saying that the U.S. had rehearsed their maneuvers for months, with intelligence learning everything about Maduro and tracking his every movement. President Trump saying that they'd wanted to do it days earlier, but had to wait for the weather to be perfect. And that on their way, the U.S. caused a blackout in Caracas for the operation. President Trump also saying that he was prepared to do a second wave of attacks, but now he thinks it won't be necessary. And that in the meantime, U.S. officials such as Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, and General Dan Kane will run Venezuela until a transition of power. Take a look.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in, and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years. So we are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. And it has to be judicious because that's what we're all about. We want peace, liberty, and justice for the great people of Venezuela.
Maduro was criminally indicted by the Biden Department of Justice back in 2020, and legally, the U.S. didn't recognize Maduro as a legitimate head of state. Instead, the U.S. recognizes Edmundo Gonzalez, who won by 70% of support in the 2024 election after Maria Machado, the Venezuelan opposition leader, was banned from running. And Machado, who won the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize and dedicated it to President Trump, praised Maduro's capture today, saying that she and Gonzalez are ready to take power and restore their nation. But President Trump said in his presser that he thinks she doesn't have the support or respect within her country to become its next leader. Meanwhile, President Trump also announcing today that Venezuela's socialist regime stole U.S. assets through force, that the U.S. had built their whole oil industry, and that they took it away. Take a look.
We built Venezuela oil industry with American talent, drive, and skill, and the socialist regime stole it from us during those previous administrations, and they stole it through force. This constituted one of the largest thefts of American property in the history of our country. considered the largest theft of property in the history of our country. Massive oil infrastructure was taken like we were babies, and we didn't do anything about it. I would have done something about it. America will never allow foreign powers to rob our people or drive us back into and out of our own hemisphere. That's what they did.
Maduro has been officially charged with narco-terrorism conspiracy, and Attorney General Pam Bondi says that he and his wife will soon face the, quote, full wrath of American justice on American soil in American courts. And the indictment really echoes what President Trump has been saying about his national security strategy. He highlights Venezuela's role in the drug trafficking throughout the world, but notably in the U.S., with over 1 million people having died from these drug overdoses. President Trump saying that he is tackling narco-terrorism and that this is a matter of putting America first. Arlene?
Certainly a major development that has wide-ranging implications around the globe. Mari, what's been the international response and how are Venezuelan people reacting?
Absolutely. It was a very emotional day for the Venezuelan diaspora, Venezuelans worldwide, as they celebrate Maduro's capture. Millions of people had left Venezuela in recent years due to economic chaos and political repression in the country. In Doral, Florida, where about 40% of people are of Venezuelan origin, music blared in celebration early on Saturday, with French President Emmanuel Macron capturing this sentiment on X, writing, quote, "The Venezuelan people are today rid of Nicolas Maduro's dictatorship and can only rejoice. By seizing power and trampling on fundamental freedoms, Nicolas Maduro gravely undermined the dignity of his own people." And Florida Representative Carlos Jimenez also calls the capture this hemisphere's equivalent of the falling of the Berlin Wall. China, however, has condemned the strike in Venezuela and Maduro's capture. China's foreign ministry saying that it's, quote, deeply shocked by the capture and that the act violates the law. China is Venezuela's main oil buyer, accounting for 80% of Venezuela's oil exports, and it's been hit hardest by the Trump administration's sanctions of a blockade of all sanctioned vessels going in and out of Venezuelan waters, and U.S. interceptions of Venezuelan oil tankers, which cut Venezuelan oil exports in December to about half of their November levels. And Maduro's capture happened actually just hours after he had met with CCP leader Xi Jinping's envoy in Caracas. Maduro reaffirmed the strategic partnership between Beijing and Caracas and touted their ties. And President Trump ordered this operation, Absolute Resolve, just a few hours after he, last night, met with U.S. Ambassador to China, David Perdue, at his Mar-a-Lago estate. Arlene, back to you.
All right, Mari, thank you so much for that update. Now, from peace talks with Ukraine to rural health care funding, plus a milestone anniversary launch, it was another eventful week for the White House. NTD's Daniel Monahan has your White House week in review.
President Trump met Sunday with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at his Mar-a-Lago residence in Palm Beach. The talks followed a 2-hour phone call between Trump and Russian President Putin. Trump expressed optimism that a peace agreement was in sight following the meeting.
We could be very close. There are one or two very thorny issues, very tough issues, but I think we're doing very well.
One such lingering issue is the heavily Russian-occupied Donbas area.
This is a very difficult question. You know our position, so it's, we have to respect our law and our people. We respect the territory which we control.
The Trump administration announced a $50 billion rural health transformation program, with states expected to receive between $150 million and $280 million each in 2026.
Our hope is that we all get healthier in America and no longer will allow zip code dictate our life expectancy.
Federal child care funding to Minnesota was frozen following allegations of widespread fraud, highlighted in an investigative video by journalist Nick Shirley.
We believe the state of Minnesota has allowed scammers and fake daycares to siphon millions of taxpayer dollars over the past decade.
Governor Tim Walz's office responded, calling the move a politicized attempt to defund programs that help Minnesotans. Protests over economic conditions spread across several Iranian provinces, with some demonstrations turning deadly. During a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Trump warned Tehran against rebuilding its nuclear program.
The consequences will be very powerful, maybe more powerful than the last time.
Netanyahu said at the meeting that Israel is awarding Trump Israel's highest civilian honor.
So we decided to break a convention too, or create a new one, and that is to award the Israel Prize, which in almost our 80 years, we've never awarded it to a non-Israeli, and we're going to award it this year to President Trump.
Trump said National Guard troops will be withdrawn from Los Angeles, Chicago, and Portland, citing significant crime reductions. The move followed legal setbacks with having the troops in the cities. Nationwide, 2025 was projected to end with an estimated 20% drop in murders, the largest on record, national crime analyst Jeff Asher told ABC News. President Trump hosted a New Year's Eve party at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Palm Beach on Wednesday. Trump was asked by a journalist if he has a New Year's resolution.
I have. Peace on earth.
Our nation began.
The administration also kicked off its Freedom 250 initiative on New Year's Eve, projecting images and historical messages onto the Washington Monument.
Paul Revere warned the colonists that the hour had come to choose freedom or tyranny.
And EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin announced new steps to regulate dozens of phthalate chemicals which are used in the production of plastic. Zeldin says exposure levels exceed safe limits in some settings and may impact reproductive health. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani signed an executive order shortly after taking office. It undoes all of former Mayor Eric Adams' orders that were issued after his indictment in 2024. Although Mamdani's office did not list the specific orders to be revoked, among them would be former Mayor Eric Adams' directive that barred mayoral appointees from discriminating against Israel and Israeli citizens. Adams said the action not only tackled anti-Semitism, but adopted a definition of anti-Semitism. The order does not, however, remove Adams' newly created office to combat anti-Semitism, which Mamdani said he would retain. In addition, Adams' order that directed police to regulate protests near houses of worship to safeguard free speech would also be undone. Coming up, a discussion on the capture of Venezuela's former leader, Nicolas Maduro, by U.S. forces. Earlier today, U.S. forces carried out the historic capture of Venezuela's leader, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife at their compound in Caracas. Venezuelans across the U.S. and in Venezuela have been celebrating and thanking President Trump. But what does it all mean for the people of Venezuela, dictators in other countries, and the security of the United States? Joining us now is Marcos Chagas, Latin America correspondent for the Epoch Times. He's also editor-in-chief of the outlet's Brazil edition. And retired U.S. Navy Captain Armin Kurdian. He's also a foreign policy and national security analyst. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Hi, Arlene.
All right, Armin, I want to start with you. What does this historic capture of Nicolas Maduro mean for America and the free world?
I think folks need to understand, first of all, that this is not an unprecedented action. You can go all the way back to basically the turn of the 20th century, and you'll see U.S. intervention several dozen times in pretty much every single South American country, either directly or indirectly, from Bolivia to Honduras to Guatemala. What it shows is that the president is absolutely clear on his efforts to make America safe when it comes to drugs and also when it comes to returning stolen U.S. property, i.e. like a lot of the refineries that were nationalized by the Venezuelan government over time, and stopping bad behavior of a bad regime, which has been a thorn in the side, frankly, of all of the Western Hemisphere. Now, I know there's questions about people asking whether this is a legal action or not, but the impact of this cannot be overemphasized.
Marcos, do you want to weigh in on this?
I mean, sure, it's huge. Where I'm speaking from, in Brazil right now, we have about 500,000 refugees from Venezuela. Colombia has about 3 million. Actually, the largest human migration crisis in modern history. is refugees from Venezuela with no war, as you would imagine, in the Ukraine war, which has a smaller number, except for the war of the regime against its people and against more in the region. So it's really meaningful for the people of Venezuela, but like we just heard, also for the whole of the region, the hemisphere, and the world. This is a regime that was deeply embedded within the Iranian regime and terrorism worldwide. We can quote Hezbollah, which was widely seen operating from the country. We can quote Russia, which every time it was about to invade another country, like Georgia in 2008, Crimea in Ukraine in 2014, and again in 2022 in the most recent invasion, which started the current large-scale war, was projecting force in Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. Now, this is huge, as we heard, and I agree, it can't be overstated, both for the people of Venezuela and what it means in the broader region. I think the reasons are mostly unfair.
Now, we did speak with some people at a Venezuelan restaurant in Doral, Florida, who are celebrating Maduro's capture. Now, Doral is home to one of the largest Venezuelan communities in Florida. So let's watch.
What does this moment mean for you?
It means so much happiness. No one wants Maduro in Venezuela. Everyone's super happy. I've been calling all the people that I know that's in Venezuela right now. They're all super happy. My grandma has been crying of happiness.
Well, I'm living here 24 years. I'm waiting for this moment, and it's amazing.
Do you have friends and family?
Yes.
There?
Many.
Do they know about it?
Yes.
What is their reaction?
They are, trying not to be happy, waiting for the prisoners that still are in prison. So,
what kind of prisoners?
Politics prisoners.
I knew Venezuela before, during, and now. This is terrible, and this is the best news, and we are so happy.
How much pain did Maduro bring to the Venezuelan people?
He brought so much pain to us, like so much frustration. Like when we were doing the elections, everyone voted for Maria Corina, and he said it was 58% him. No, he didn't. No one wanted Maduro there. Maduro has caused pain to all of the Venezuelans there. The only people that like Maduro is the people that are getting money from him and are stealing money from the people in Venezuela.
What message does it send to the people in those countries, Nicaragua, Cuba, Colombia, where communism and socialism is running deep?
Socialism is not good. That our governments are not good. We need freedom.
Do you think this moment brings hope to other countries that are under dictatorship?
Of course, many hopes to Cuba, to Nicaragua, to all the countries, especially in South America, well, all America, Latin America.
Venezuela is free now. Soon is coming Cuba, Nicaragua, and I hope that Brazil and Colombia too.
What is your message to the Trump administration?
Well, first is thank you.
Trump, thank you so much for doing this for us and doing this for Venezuela, because we've been waiting for this 25 years of us waiting patiently for Maduro to leave.
Now, Marcos, you kind of referred to this a little bit earlier, but what is your reaction to what we just saw?
Well, I think I'm even a bit moved by it, because I've been reporting on this for a while now, about 4 or 5 years. And really, this is a regime that has caused so much pain in the region. When we talk about drug trafficking to the US, I can quote a quick statistic. In 2022, about 1/4 of the world's cocaine went through the hands of the Venezuelan regime. And a part of it went to the US, but a part of it was distributed to Brazil, my home country, and then to Europe. A part of it went to the Guayaquil port in Ecuador, and then to countries in the Pacific. So, like I mentioned, it's even a bit moving to see what's going on. And I think it has some kind of energy or vibe as kind of a Berlin Wall moment in a way, because so many people who have lived under communist repression for so long are finally able to try to have hopes of freedom. And even those who have loved ones in Venezuela and are abroad, as I said, 7 million refugees, have hopes of being reunited with their families.
Now, Armin, Trump has said that the U.S. is working with Venezuela's Vice President Delcy Rodriguez to temporarily run the country until a transition can be made. So what do we know about Rodriguez, and what is your reaction to the U.S. running Venezuela?
It's going to be more on a macro scale. The basic functions of government are still going to be handled by the Venezuelan government without really any intervention by the U.S. But I think what it is going to be, we're telling the vice president, look, you need to listen to our Secretary of State and our foreign policy, and you're going to make these changes, or else we're going to basically remove you as well. So what essentially is going to be is we're going to have to eliminate the corruption. We've got to restore a legitimacy to Venezuela's oil production and oil sales all over the world. We've got to make sure that that money is getting back to the Venezuelan people and not lining the pockets of the corrupt leaders. You remember back when oil was about $140 a barrel under Hugo Chavez, he was talking a big talk about how tough he was. And then when oil came down, they weren't so tough. This is the problem of socialism. This is the problem of communism. Even when the money is there, communism and socialism is enslavement of the people because it creates and forces dependency. And that dependency just demands more dependency. And we're seeing that right now in New York City. We might be seeing that in Seattle as well. So this is a very loud message to the rest of the world. And Donald Trump needs to show that when you release people from the yoke of socialism, when you take that ball and chain away and release human energy, that the capability and capacity of a citizenry to do great things and be liberated is almost unending.
Now, Marcos, according to earlier reports, there are about 30,000 Cuban forces in Venezuela running the country. What will it take to ensure those forces don't continue to operate?
So it's delicate. I'm curious to see how the US is going to manage this. And that's also a very interesting point because a lot of people have been saying, and I've talked throughout the day as we've been covering this locally in the Portuguese language in Brazil. We've been talking to refugees, to people who have survived the regime, to people who were dissidents who have been protesting against the regime and risking their lives. And they all said that they are not concerned about so-called US occupation because they are currently under occupation by enemies of the US, especially Cuba, Russia, and others who have sent advisors to the regime for years. When we talk about Cuba specifically, even Maduro's security guards from 2017 onwards have been mostly Cubans, and a large part of the army has been trained by Cuban agents. So how to get that out of the government? That's a curious question, but I think one point that has to be made as well is that I think this is part of the rationale for the US to be involved in this right now, because if some other government comes in locally, there's a lot of risk that we could be seeing another regime come up, and that it would not be possible to remove the elements that have made up the structure of the Chavista regime in there. So I think that's also a point that's between the lines in there. When some talk about a new occupation by the US, we have to keep in mind that a Cuban occupation has already been going on with an illegitimate leader which was not elected and defrauded elections last year to try to give him some sort of legitimacy.
Now, Armin, reactions are already coming in from around the world. The UN and a number of nations are condemning this capture, including the Chinese Communist Party. So what message does this send to countries like China and as well as Cuba and Nicaragua?
Well, I'm not going to lose any sleep over China and Russia complaining about this actually happening. But what I can say is you are going to hear in public a lot of criticism from South America, the Organization of American States, all of those countries. Now, privately, I do believe that you're going to be a lot of positive feedback from these countries for removing this cancer from South America. You've got to remember when Maduro won his election, everybody around the world said that this is not a legitimate election. This was stolen and there was cheating, and that he is not the rightful leader. So I think what a lot of these presidents and these prime ministers in South and Central America, they kind of have to criticize in public, and maybe there might be some folks outspoken in their parliaments, but secretly, I think there are going to be a positive reaction to this. And I think we also need to lean on them, to lean on the Venezuelan government also privately to say, okay, look, you have been given an opportunity. This is not, don't look at this as, Big Brother coming down and stepping down on you. Look at this as an opportunity to free yourselves and make something of your country with all of your natural and mineral wealth.
Now, Marcos, what specifically does this send to the Chinese Communist Party? What happened this morning?
It basically gives the message that the US is not going to play around as it sees its adversaries act throughout the world and in its near abroad. It basically sends the message that the world order is essentially being reconfigured as we speak. Giving you an example, a lot of the problems we have seen the US government address recently are things that, by the previous logic, would be addressed at the UN or at the WTO, the World Trade Organization, and so forth. But the essential message is that that's not how things are going to be run right now. Right now, things are going to be run by peace through strength from the US government, by personal relations from Trump with other leaders, and through economic pressure, especially tariffs. It essentially gives the message that, one, we're not playing around, and two, the message that the UN or other multilateral organizations are not going to be able to solve conflicts like they maybe did in the past. This is about one-on-one relationships with from whichever country to the United States, and patience is very short.
Now, Armin, President Trump has emphasized that no U.S. lives or equipment were lost in this operation, and that the U.S. used equipment that adversaries can't even imagine. So how inspiring is this show of strength to Americans as the administration has already kicked off its 250th anniversary of our founding?
The fact that they pulled this off in the manner that they actually did, again, this is something else that you can't overemphasize. This is something that I'm sure is striking awe and fear into the hearts of a lot of countries around the rest of the world of what our military is actually capable of doing when it's properly planned and executed. Delta Force went in and conducted a flawless operation. They are the experts. They are the world-renowned top of the pyramid when it comes to hostage rescue or when it comes to this, a capture effort. And when you consider the fact that there was fighter cover, when there was airborne early warning, when there were drones, there was Marines involved, an entire strike group, an expeditionary strike group down there, 15,000 U.S. servicemen at least and women executing this, giving the officer and tactical command the resources that they need in case something happens. There was an emphasis on a lot of the discussion that the U.S. conducted self-defense strikes against Venezuelan targets, which is saying, look, we weren't out here to kill or destroy the Venezuelan military. If we were getting shot at, we suppressed it, we ended that threat, and we moved on with our lives and continuing on. This is also something that I think folks need to understand, that this was not a strike against Venezuela. This was specifically targeted to remove an individual. They were on deck for an hour and 28 minutes. They came out, and they were very successful in that endeavor.
Marcos, your final thoughts on this show of strength by the United States?
Well, when we talk about the show of strength, of course, it serves more than just the purpose of getting Maduro out. When we talk about Operation Midnight Hammer, which happened in Iran last June, and when we talk about this, both of them also serve the purpose of detente, of giving to the adversaries of America the message that peace through strength is a viable thing, and that the threat of the use of force is very real and can be executed with precision. In 1991, back during the first Gulf War, basically the Chinese regime built its war doctrine around the mighty display of force from the US Air Force in that war. And I think both of those incidents sent this kind of message that modern warfare is something America is willing to use against its enemies.
All right, Marcos Shakos and Armin Kurdian, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thanks, Arlene.
And coming up in the NFL, it all comes down to this weekend as teams battle for the final 2 playoff spots. NTD's Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we return. Sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, good to see you as always.
Good to see you, Arlene.
Now, I want to get started right off with the NFL. I know there's a lot of college games going on, but let's go to the NFL because this is their final weekend of the regular season, and we have a couple of very pivotal games today. So tell us about that.
Yeah, right now in Tampa Bay, Panthers versus the Buccaneers. These teams are first and second, respectively, in the NFC South Division. So if the Panthers win, they win the division, they automatically get that last playoff spot left in the NFC. Buccaneers would then be eliminated with a loss. But if the second place Buccaneers win, it's a little more interesting. They would then be tied for the division lead with the Panthers at 8-9. And then it would depend on the outcome of tomorrow's Saints versus Falcons game. Saints win gives Tampa Bay the division, Falcons win, and the Panthers get it. Now the score right now, 13-7 Buccaneers in the third quarter, so this could get interesting. Then tonight, the second game is Seattle versus San Francisco. Now this game is also going to decide a division winner, that is the NFC West, as well as who gets the top seed in the NFC, and then they would get home field advantage throughout their playoffs. Very important. Loser, though, would still be in the playoffs in that scenario. They would probably drop down to the 5th or 6th spot, depending on the outcome of a few games tomorrow. So a lot at stake tonight and tomorrow in the NFL.
And speaking of tomorrow, we have a big game in the AFC as the Ravens and Steelers face off on Sunday night. And then for the division, this is for the division title. So what's the status of the Steelers All-Pro linebacker T.J. Watt?
Yeah, it looks like he's going to play. Now, he's been out after suffering that partially collapsed lung a few weeks ago. This is during a dry needle therapy session. He's had surgery. He's recovered. He was a full participant at practice on a Friday. He said he feels good. He's excited to play. I mean, that's very big for Pittsburgh. Watt, he's a former Defensive Player of the Year. He's an excellent pass rusher. They'll especially need him because they're probably without their most dynamic playmaker on offense. That's Pro Bowl receiver DK Metcalf. He was suspended a couple weeks ago after a confrontation with a fan in Detroit. So that's the final game tomorrow, the Sunday night game. Winner gets the division title here and the final playoff spot in the AFC. Loser is eliminated.
All right, so let's get to the college football. The playoffs don't continue until Thursday and Friday night, but next week, which is a change from the normal Saturday schedule. So why the change now?
Well, you know, next week on Saturday is when the NFL playoffs start, and I'm sure the NCAA would rather not go head-to-head against them as far as like TV ratings are concerned. I mean, nobody beats the NFL there. Of course, the NFL, though, normally does not have their games on Fridays and Saturdays in the fall. That's actually because of a little-known thing called the Sports Broadcasting Act of 1961. It prevents the NFL from having any games on Friday nights or Saturdays within 75 miles of any high school or college games. Now, this was really designed to help for viewership for amateur games because, you know, that's when they played high school games on Friday night, college games on Saturday. But it's only in effect from the second weekend of September to the second weekend in December. So right now, Saturdays are fair game for the NFL. So as you said, though, playoffs do start next week. For Thursday night, Miami versus Ole Miss in the first semifinal game. And then Friday night, we've got Indiana versus Oregon.
And how are you expecting those games to be?
Well, you know, I'm going to go with Miami to beat Ole Miss Thursday night. Amazingly, the Hurricanes have won 2 games as the underdogs so far. I think then Indiana is going to continue on with their amazing season, really beating Oregon on Friday night. I mean, it's pretty incredible that Indiana is even a national power at this point. I mean, they've been a doormat for the previous 100 years pretty much. So I'd love to see for that story to go. I kind of think that's how both games are going to go, but I've been wrong a few times before. I'll just say that, Arlene.
Well, I forgot to ask you about the NFL. What teams do you think are going to be playing there?
Well, you know, of the ones that are going on today, I really think the Buccaneers are going to be able to get the Panthers. But like you said, that still doesn't actually get the Buccaneers into the playoffs. And they still need then help tomorrow, so it's a little complicated with that. Steelers versus Ravens. I think the Ravens are going to pull that one off there too. I mean, the Steelers without DK Metcalf on offense are not the same thing. I think it's definitely going to be a low-scoring game, though. I'll probably go with the Ravens in that one.
All right, we'll see what happens. Now, college basketball, we have a number of ranked teams in action today. Where do things stand so far?
Yeah, a lot of games going on today. Let's actually look at some scores here. Starting in the SEC, unranked Kentucky losing to number 14 Alabama 89-74. Wildcats now dropped to 9-5 on the season. Crimson Tide at 11-3. In the Big 12, number 15 Texas Tech scores 102 points in their blowout win over Oklahoma State. And then back in the SEC, 23rd ranked Georgia beats Auburn 104-100 in overtime in that game there. Let's look at some more scores here. In the Big 12, 10th ranked BYU wins on the road at Kansas State 83-73. 17th ranked Kansas upset on the road at UCF 81-75. Well, tough day for the Sunflower State fans there. And then finally, number 6, Houston wins at Cincinnati 67-60. Let's look at some more scores here. 11th ranked Vanderbilt wins at South Carolina 83-71. Number 12, North Carolina upset on the road at SMU 97-83. And in a top 25 showdown in the SEC, number 18, Arkansas beats number 19, Tennessee 86-75. Still got some more scores here. In the ACC, 21st ranked Virginia won at NC State 76-61. Number 6, Duke won at Florida State 91-87. And finally, top-ranked Arizona won at Utah 97-78. Wildcats now 14-0 on the season. Going on right now, UCLA is at 25th ranked Iowa. Then tonight we've got Illinois, number 20 Illinois at Penn State. That game starts at 7 p.m. Eastern time. 5th ranked Purdue is in at Wisconsin at 8 p.m. And then 22nd ranked Florida, who are the defending national champions, are at Missouri. That game starts at 8:30 Eastern time. So, as you said, a whole lot of games going on right now today.
All right, Dave, thank you so much for that update. And I'm sure you'll be busy watching this weekend.
I will be very busy this weekend on the couch.
All right, Dave.
Thank
now,
you.
advances in medical science have dramatically increased average life expectancy worldwide over the past few decades. Yet the upper limit of human lifespan appears to have remained largely unchanged or may even be shorter than what historical accounts suggest. So what's behind this lack of progress? In this episode of Vital Signs, physician Dr. Anthony Chaffee joins host Brendan Fallon to explain how our modern diet could be a key factor.
How long do you expect to live to? 80, 90, 100 years? In America, the average lifespan for men is around 76 years. Women are tallying a little higher at 81 years. But what if it could be and should be much longer? History is punctuated with accounts of people living exceptionally long lives, well beyond 100 years. Is this really possible? If so, what exactly is limiting the lifespan of modern humans? Today's guest, Dr. Anthony Chaffee, says the shift away from eating what our primitive ancestors ate is largely to blame. Dr. Chaffee is an American physician and a professional athlete who's used the carnivore diet to optimize his performance and health. A diet comprised solely of meat, eggs, fat, and possibly some dairy. Is human health really on the upward trend that we've been led to believe it's on? What can we learn from ancient and indigenous societies about eating to live healthier and longer? And how is modern food coming to resemble a narcotic? Welcome to Vital Signs, where we learn how to get healthier from all angles, from the biochemical and nutritional to the things we do that nourish our minds and our souls. I'm Brendan Fallon. In terms of everything that we could be doing to improve our health and increase our longevity and things like that, where would you place doing a dietary intervention? Where would you place carnivore or doing a ketogenic diet in the scheme of that?
I think it's extremely important. If we look at those animal models, if you feed animals food that they're not supposed to eat, they get very sick, but they get the same chronic diseases we get. They get obesity, diabetes, cancers, autoimmunity, arthritis, etc., Alzheimer's, or dementias of one degree or another. These are the same things that we're afflicted with. We see native populations that haven't been exposed to agriculture for 8,000 years, 10,000 years, like some of us have, such as the Native Australian Aboriginals and Native Americans. They have far higher rates of these chronic diseases, cancers, autoimmunity, diabetes, etc. Only when eating a Western diet, though. When they're eating their traditional diet, which is predominantly meat, maybe some different plants that, native plants that they know of, but typically they would eat those in times of distress when they weren't able to get the normal food that they did. But they're hunter-gatherers with an emphasis on the hunter. Native Americans, the Great Plains, they had bison. They just ate bison year round, and that's why the American military and government wiped out all of the bison, killed over 100 million bison, down to about 50 of them. And that was what Wild Bill Hickok said. It was every buffalo killed is an Indian dead, because they require this for the year. They need that food. So they transitioned in the last 150 years or so, and we saw in real time their health be significantly impacted, and now they have some of the highest rates of chronic disease in any population. And I think that is solely on the head of eating an inappropriate diet. Now we have a lot of other things now. We have artificial ingredients. We have all these different chemicals that had never existed in nature before that we just invented, and we get to put them in the food supply without proving that they're safe first. That's pretty crazy to me. We have stevia; it's a sweetener, and but studies in mice have shown that using stevia, just like equivalent of 1 can of stevia a day, actually lowers.
Lawmakers are now holding a media briefing reacting to the U.S.'s capture of Venezuelan regime leader Nicolas Maduro. Let's tune in to see the briefing in Florida.
And so I think I do need to mention our host, the mayor of this great city, and then we've got constitutional officials. We've got officials from Broward and so many others. And so thank all of you for being here. January 3rd marks a historic day, clearly for the Venezuelan people and for our entire hemisphere, and also for the national security interests of the United States of America. We warned that what we were seeing in this hemisphere was not political theater. It wasn't a show. That this was real. That the President of the United States had been very clear about his policy. The day of accepting the death of American citizens, the poisoning of our youth, the destabilization of our hemisphere are over. And time again, and I thank all the members of the press, we kept saying it. And we got a lot of questions, and we kept saying, just watch, because it is a new world under the leadership of this president. I've also said on multiple occasions to many of the members of the press that I was convinced that to Maduro, there were 3 options that he had left, and that one of them was about to close out. I thought we had the option of leaving, and it's very clear that the President of the United States, through his Secretary of State, the brilliant Marco Rubio, offered Maduro many ways to find an exit path to get out of the country. So I kept saying that was one option that was going to close. The other 2 options I thought were either the Noriega option or the Soleimani option. Well, President Trump, when Maduro did not accept or did not believe what the president was saying, President Trump decided on that option, to use the brave men and women, those volunteers of the United States Armed Forces, to go get him in Caracas and bring him to justice. And let's remember who we're dealing with. We're dealing with a man who was under indictment in the Southern District of New York for drug trafficking and multiple other offenses, just like, by the way, Noriega had similar offenses. Well, we have been accepting and tolerating and seeing the death and the poisoning of countless young Americans. We've seen boats and airplanes come north from the south, and we were able to only intercept a very small percentage of those. And for so many years, the attitude of different administrations was like, so what? Those days are over. It is an important day for the American people. It is a crucial day for the entire hemisphere. And it is the one thing that all of us have all been saying. We've all been saying, and you've heard me say this time and time again, that the solution, the real solution for the Venezuelan people was total, absolute democracy and freedom returning to Venezuela. And because of President Trump and the United States Armed Forces, that day has already begun. I also, I am going to make some references in Spanish, but I also remind all of our friends from the press, and a lot of us have known each other for many, many years. You've heard me say this time and time again. I said this in the 4 years that President Trump was out of the White House, and I said it after he came back, that I was convinced that the tyranny, this anti-American narco-terrorist regime in Venezuela, the tyranny in Cuba, and also the tyrannical dictatorship in Nicaragua, I've said it multiple times, I believed that they would have not survived another 4 years of Trump in the White House. I said that then. When President Trump comes back, I repeated that. I said, I'm convinced that these three tyrannies are not going to survive these 4 years of President Trump. And my friends, what we are seeing is that the first of those tyrannies has not survived President Trump. The next two, their days are also counted. Déjame muy brevemente en español. Si encuentro mis notas en español, porque aquí tengo un arroz con mango.
¿Tú sabes hablar español?
Sí, pero como decía mi padre, yo, analfabeto en 2 idiomas, así que tengo que tener cuidado. Primero a todos ustedes, miembros de la prensa, gracias por estar aquí, a nuestros colegas, a mis colegas del Congreso de los Estados Unidos, mi hermano y mi hermana, obviamente qué privilegio estar con ella, pero con todos estos oficiales electos de nuestra comunidad, que para nosotros son colegas, son amigos, y que admiramos tanto. Gracias a cada uno de ustedes por estar aquí con nosotros hoy. Esto ha sido un día realmente histórico, un día que muchos habíamos estado esperando, trabajando para que llegara y ansiosos que por fin llegara. Esto marca una nueva época por décadas.
There we have lawmakers in Florida responding to the capture of Nicolas Maduro earlier today, crediting President Trump for his historic show of strength. They said this is not only a victory for Venezuelans, but an important day for the American people who have been the targets of Maduro's actions against our country through the drug trafficking and the takeover of oil companies in Venezuela. They mentioned tyranny in Nicaragua and Cuba, as well as Venezuela, could not survive a Trump administration. And that's going to be the news for this evening. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Arlene Richards. Good night.